speakers very well, right?
Well, I think all of us know John Hergenrather and Steve Hayley very well, but for those who are watching the live, they have been leading creation encounter trips for a long time, and they have a heart for the Lord and sharing that with families and with kids and equipping young people with confidence in Christ, but also with questions to ask their professors and to start thinking critically. And I really appreciate them. I would not be who I am if it weren't for those two. They have taken me in to to help guide and encouraged me to help spread the gospel and also the glory of our Creator confidently with other people. And that's what we at Creation Encounter want to do, is to encourage other people, all of you, to go out into creation and share about our amazing Creator, Jesus Christ. So, without any ado, let's welcome John and Steve and hear what they have to say about Creation Encounter.
Well, thanks, guys. It's just really great to be here. It's great to be anywhere, actually, right now. It's been, 4 years, I think, and I've had a couple surgeries, and but here I am, and thanks be to God. Yep. And anyway, we have a great, I think, program today. And hopefully we can encourage you guys to keep doing what you're doing. And some of the times that the prayers that you offer are so important to having a successful, what I mean by successful journey or trip is that it touches the hearts of these people, and they are the Lord quickens something in them, and they want to continue spreading this good word about our Creator. So, Steve.
Well, I just have to say something about my brother John. On our trip 2 weeks ago with a huge group, 8th grade class from Central Christian School in Redmond, 40 8th graders. A lady came up and said, "I just want to thank you, John, because you started me on a ministry," 2000? 2006, and she and her husband have been doing presentations and slides and training people because of what happened at, I think it was the John Day Fossil Beds. So that was so encouraging. I know it was to hear it, and for John to know their seeds being sown. So, well, we have more to say about the impact on young people. You heard a couple comments on our trip last week. Yeah.
Yes. We had Mike Ord too that helped us, and he was talking about the Bible and how it supports what happened in the Ice Age. And after he was done, this high schooler standing next to me turned and said, "John, I want to be a teacher, and I want to be able to teach the Bible in the way you guys do." And so anyway, he was inspired too, and that's really what we're doing, is trying to bring glory to God. And you know, one thing Mark said about sometimes fear keeps us from making that connection between these wonderful facts of creation and how it relates to our salvation, our Savior, how it relates to the Scriptures. And but prayer makes such a difference, and we've just seen that happen over and over again. And so even if you guys aren't out there on the field, if you're part of a prayer team praying for design science and creation encounter, you're doing a huge a huge thing.
I have 3 different groups that pray for our work when we go out. And the neat part is when I come back, they say, okay, what did God do? And I get to report on those things. That's such a thrill. And there's nothing that's more fulfilling for either one of us than to sense God's using this ministry. Yeah, well, we're going to share more at the break after we come back from our break. And John has a handout we'd like to give you on how to share Christ when you're out looking at creation or evidences for the flood. It's really been useful. Well, we're going to go ahead and start, if we could, with our slides. We got a few slides just to introduce you to this forgotten corner, Oregon's forgotten quarter, Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Steens Mountain. And there have been people come up to me already today and say, where is that? So we're going to show you where that's at. Let's go to slide 1. There's a map of Oregon, and my finger is just about where Steens Mountain is. And that's, we're going to show you some other pictures, but it's about a 30-mile long break in the Earth's crust right there. We'll show you some more pictures next. And what we're going to see also is evidence for these ancient Ice Age lakes. The dark spots there are existing lakes today. The other outlines are where lakes were during the Ice Age, and they were all over. If you we've said this to groups, if you got in a canoe in Bend, you could just about go to Death Valley with short portages between lakes. So you think, oh, Nevada, there's nothing down there. Oh, there were lakes all over in Nevada. And so this is exciting to know about. And Malheur, where we're going to go to see some of the wildlife in this video, is one of those remnant lakes. So, and then also, let me get my pointer here. This lake, Alvord Lake, is the remnant. That's a Ice Age lake with only a tiny little spot down there where there's still a lake. But that was a huge Ice Age lake. All gone. What happened? Climate change. Okay, this is engineered by the Lord, not Indians driving SUVs. Okay, this is really an important point. But let's go on to the next one. Yeah, so we took 3 days to tour. And this map was those 3 days. We stayed at a retreat area called Crystal Crane Hot Springs, and then went out each day and did loop tours around the mountain, over the mountain, and so forth. Next. Yeah, so one of the places we'll end up at in the video is Pete French's Round Barn, and one of our tours will come past that on the first day. We're going to be looking at Mary Ann's presentation here at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge headquarters on God's design in birds. I think you'll enjoy her talk, and she's going to do one a little later on that's more detailed. So, next slide. This is Steens Mountain, just a little section of it, and this is a long road going up here, and then that's a mile drop off. So as you're driving up there, you don't have a sense that you're actually up on very much of a mountain, and suddenly you get to the edge and it's a mile straight down, and you're looking down on the Alvord Desert, which is the only true desert in Oregon. It's so flat that it's just really tempting to get out there in your SUV or whatever and race, which we did. Next. So, we'll talk about Malheur Wildlife Refuge first. The reason there's a refuge there is right here. Can you tell what that lady's wearing? Feathers. The feathers came from, next, that bird. That's one of 2 or 3 different species. This is a snowy egret, and those plumes that are here and here, as well as on the head, are what was on that lady's head. It's interesting how the beaver trapping beavers was driven by the hat industry. Did you know that? And when hats went out of style that were made out of beaver fur, no more beavers were trapped. So there was a wildlife biologist, Mr. Finley, came over and heard about these birds being killed by the thousands. They would just take the feathers and throw the bird away. And he said, this has got to stop. So as a result, the refuge was born. So that's where we're going to go. John, do you want to say anything?
No, I'd just like to see where we're going to go.
Let's see where we're going to go. Okay, thank you. All right, let's roll.
Here we are at a creation encounter trip, the Steens Malheur. We've had this plan for 10 years now because this is Oregon's forgotten corner. And it's not a destination resort at all, but we're going to make it Oregon's unforgotten corner because this is an area that's full of God's wonders. We're going to look at his the things he's created, the design in the birds. There's 325 birds that come through this area every year. And the geology speaks of a recent flood and a recent catastrophe. We're going to study that too. And so what we love to do is we start with the Bible, and then it makes sense for what we're seeing.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Steve, and we're ready for the great adventure at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. We're going to see the refuge today. We're going to see some wonderful things, and we have a beautiful day ahead of us and a great group of people. Glad that you could join us, and we're very, very happy to be here. This has been a lot of planning and dreaming for the last few years, and Creation Encounter has been able to return to this wonderful place in God's creation. We're going to see a lot of birds today, and we're going to enjoy just getting to know each other and getting familiar with some of the more exotic birds that are residing on this refuge. So, looking forward to it. We're off like a herd of turtles.
So it's probably 8 miles.
Okay.
6 miles.
Sure.
Then we go past and take sod down.
Okay.
Okay, we're in what's called the Basin and Range area, and just a little background on that. It was originally named that by Captain John C. Fremont in 1843 as he explored this area. It's a basin and range because basins don't drain. The water that falls in here stays in the lakes or in the low areas until it evaporates. So we'll be talking a lot about Ice Age lakes around here, and they were very plentiful. This was a very different area during the Ice Age.
Some places where it's irrigated well, I saw a big patch of milkweed growing, which we'll probably see more of, and that's the only plant that the monarch butterflies will lay their eggs on their migration north. They'll migrate north of here, sometimes up into Canada, and then the 4th generation turns around and goes back to the very, very same grove that their great-grandparents came from. Great-great-grandparents came from. Having never been there before.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
What a testimony.
Yeah.
Wow. And so we've got about 13 miles of gravel, which will be a little bit dusty. We're sorry about that. We'll try to have a little rain next time. Lake Malheur, as well as Harney Lake and Mud Lake, are just remnants of ancient Ice Age lakes. A lake that covered this area and much of the Basin Range was lake bed, was full of water following the flood, and then during the Ice Age, we had tremendous amounts of precipitation in this area, which created snow in the mountains, like Steens, where we're going to go tomorrow, and lots of water. So in some cases, these lakes continued to fill after the flood from the precipitation and overtopped their basins and created channels where they overtop, and that just gives you an idea of the type of environment this was in the Ice Age. It was just lakes everywhere, forests. We have to understand that what we're seeing today is a very, very, very different place than what these people who came here following the Tower of Babel and explored and exploited this area for its wildlife. They were in a very different place than today. They wouldn't recognize what we're seeing today if they could be here. Why did this refuge get started? The birds. Hats. And William Finley, a biologist, conservationist from the turn of the century. Finley Refuge over in the Willamette Valley is named after him. He came over here, he had heard about this was a fantastic place for birds, and he came over here and saw what the market and the hunters that were hunting those plumes were doing. They were slaughtering literally thousands of birds just for the plumes for these hats, and we got pictures of those in there. And as a result, William Finley, he talked to Teddy Roosevelt, who's a great conservationist, and he said, we've got to do something to protect these birds. We just can't let people go in and shoot them randomly, no laws, no limits, no anything. And so when this lake at that time was a little higher, was full of these birds, but they had been decimated in certain areas by these hunters. And so as a result, this was set aside by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1908 as a preservation area for these birds. So that's the history on how it got started. Then more was added later as they saw the value of the wetlands as it goes up towards Steens Mountain, which we'll be able to see today. But the whole history really goes back to hats. Isn't that interesting? Road. Did you guys see the shrikes? They're black and white birds, about this long. And my dad called them butcher birds. I said, Dad, how come they call them a butcher bird? It's because they can catch other little birds or insects like locusts. Insects, and they'll stick them on a thorn or on a fence, a barbed wire fence, and they'll actually hang some things up there for later lunch. So.
Well, I want to start out with a verse. This is from Job 12:7-10. But ask the beasts, and they will teach you, the birds of heaven, and they will tell you, or the bushes or trees of the earth, and they will teach you. The fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every living creature and the breath of all mankind. So, have we been listening to nature? Have we been thinking, what is this reflecting about Jesus Christ, our Creator? It says that our life is in his hand and our breath is in his hand. It's in his control. And so I've been listening to nature and creation. And I think a lot of creation scientists have too. When we hear creation scientists like Joe Martin, he talks about all these incredible designs in nature that, like the bombardier beetle, how it's constructed. Why doesn't it explode when it releases that, its bomb? And a lot of other questions. But I have not heard very many explain why we see a lot of beauty in creation. And so as an artist, I've been observing that, and so there's 3 principles. They're very basic, and I'm just gonna talk to you guys about today because maybe if you think about that when you're looking at the birds, it'll help you identify birds because you're looking for specific features, but also it'll help you to appreciate how well and beautifully designed the animal kingdom is aesthetically, not just structurally. So the first design principle is proportion, and so that's a ratio or division between the sizes of colors, shapes, and or forms. So shapes would be like a 2-dimensional, form is more 3-dimensional. Their relationship to one another in an artwork or in a bird's body. And so we start out with basic symmetry, which is classical symmetry, and that's a division right down your body. And so if you look at turn the page, you'll see a sketch from Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. This guy right here, he is very famous. So if you split a line right down the middle of him, you have a very symmetrical form. You have basically a mirror image of the man on the other side. And then if you split with the pronghorn, you see that it is mirror image on both sides. So that's classical symmetry, and that contributes to structure, to balance. Like, I can walk because I'm symmetrical. I mean, if I was like this, I'd be walking like, if I was asymmetrical, I'd be having a hard time walking. So God thought of that when he was designing the structure of animals and our bodies. Then we go to asymmetry. This is a more interesting symmetry. The golden ratio is this type of symmetry. It is a unequal ratio or proportion of units or shapes, and it gives greater visual interest to the viewer. So you have 2-part division and 3-part division. So I made a little box there so you can kind of see what a 2-part division is. It's not right in the middle. It's a little different shapes. One shape is smaller than the other. Then the golden ratio is 3-part division. You have a small shape, a medium shape, and a large shape. And then, so I tried to just show you here how in the Mona Lisa you have a 2-part division. Many portraits are 2-part division. You have the eyes or the head in the upper part of the painting. You don't want to have a face in the very middle of the painting. It's just not interesting. It's symmetrical, and it's just not that interesting. So if you put the face a little higher, it creates more visual interest. Your eyes goes to the face, and it moves around the image. Also, I just showed the Vitruvian Man again in the 3-part division. We have head, torso, legs. You see that in beetles, in butterflies, that type of structure. Okay, so those are like physical balances, but I'm going to take a shift into the color realm too here. Equal proportions of color, well, they are uninteresting. To create visual interest in artwork needs one color to dominate and the others to follow, creating a balance of eye movement across your canvas, your sculpture, or a bird. So like did anybody see the black-neck stilt? I heard that people were seeing black-neck stilts out there. You have a black and white bird. It's almost an even ratio between black and white, but it's a little bit more on the white side. And then you have a little accent of red legs and a red eye. And so you get a division of 3 size amounts of color, which creates more interest, visual interest for your eye to move around. Also, breaking up, if you look at the black-neck stilt, for those looking at the picture, this guy right here, if you break up a black shape with a little bit of white, even like a woodpecker, if you guys are familiar with woodpecker designs or penguin designs, God has a little bit of white on a black, mainly a black field. So it creates a little bit more visual interest. Your eye moves around the canvas, the bird canvas. Also, I just skipped this, but this proportion here, you see the bird, it's a 2-part proportion, and you have a small head and then a larger body. So it's not like the head is as big as the body.
I mean, you'll have maybe the bill with the head, could be as long as the body, but the head is basically a smaller shape in relation to a larger shape. And that creates visual interest, it creates structural balance. It's a good design. But I think this is what we can attribute to Christ as being brilliant design. It's a common theme that we see throughout creation, and we can give him the praise that he is due for what he's created. And I want to just end on a couple verses here. We have Psalm 104, 24. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. And worthy are you, O Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. From Revelation. So, thank you.
So, you guys know what this is, right? Can you tell me what it says? No, I can't either. So we took a picture of it and sent it to a lady who's Indian, Paiute, part Paiute, and she lives in Boise. Her name's Coyote Short, and she's quite a character, but she looked at that picture and she said, I think I can tell you what it is. Can you see the zigzag?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, she said this is a map of this territory. That's the Blitzen River. And it's saying this is a village, and I think there's another circle. The light's not right, but does that look like a circle there? Yeah. Anyway, there are villages marked on here, or settlements where the Indians lived. But it took some ingenuity and some time. Can you imagine trying to carve this? What would you use? Something harder, yeah. Maybe a quartzite or something that you could peck with, and you'd have to be patient to do that. But Coyote looked at this picture. She said, this is a map, it's an ownership, and it's saying, and I don't know if this is the symbol that keyed her in. This has actually been marked with something. Somebody put some red paint on it. I don't think that was there, John, originally. But she said, this is a map of the water bug people's territory. I said, oh. Now, of all the things you could pick as an Indian to be your symbol, I wouldn't have thought the water bug would be right up on the top, huh? You know, it would be the lions, or the mountain lions, or the cougars, or something. But for some reason, this is the water bug people. But quite often, these pictographs or petroglyphs are not just symbolic in an abstract way. They're giving information, in this case about territory. But John, tell us what else they talk about.
Yeah, that's right. She has studied this, and her father and mother and grandparents have studied it for years. And they're Paiutes and northern Paiutes. And she has shown us several places. I'm not sure she could identify it on this rock, but several places there was symbols of the flood. There was the symbols of 6 days of creation and the 7th day, and the flood of Noah's time.
Yes, and sometimes 8 people show up. Or there's other symbols that indicate there's knowledge that they had that didn't just depend on some missionaries bringing it. That's knowledge they carried from the Tower of Babel. Well, these people, are they primitive? What do you think about that word? Is it a good word? Is it a word that we ought to use?
Not in their intelligence, no.
Not in their intelligence. Yes?
How primitive would we feel if we had to survive out here alone?
Yeah, I have a fraternity brother that's his skill. He takes people out here with basically nothing except maybe a loincloth. He teaches them how to survive. But I'll tell you what, they listen and they learn in a few days. This is what you do exactly if you're going to live. These people were thriving here. Based on the archaeological evidence, as we're going to talk about tomorrow, they were originally hunting some Ice Age animals here. Ground sloths. Do you know how big they were? 9 feet tall. taller than this rock. And there's evidence that they hunted them and ate them, yeah. From cave midden, stuff that's back in caves, which I don't think the people necessarily lived in all the time, but they did use. But you would use them too if there was a bad storm right now. Yeah, get out of the thunder and lightning and so forth. But there were also giant, you ready for this? Bison. The bison we have today are piddlings. Next to these things weighed 2 tons, 4,000 pounds, and 6 foot on a horn. They're massive. There's one actually at the, I fly into Kentucky a lot to the Cincinnati airport, and there's Ice Age skeleton animals there in the Delta section. Incredibly huge animals, and they were hunting them with an instrument called an atlatl. That's a very sophisticated hunting, and some of you are going to get to try that tomorrow. So I hope, is anybody here a javelin thrower?
I did it in Death Valley.
Okay, all right. Well, you know the tool. It's pretty interesting. Well, I've worked on them since you threw that. I've actually got them more sophisticated. But I have an engineer who analyzed this, the atlatl. He's not a creationist, but he kept saying things like, I can't believe they could do this. I can't believe that they had this technology, that they could get things down to the gram in terms of the weights on one end or the other, the length, and so forth, and the force of the atlatl based on its, mine is about that long, some were up to this long, some were shorter, but they're engineered carefully. It's not random. And we're going to go past a place where some atlatls were actually dug up by Luther Cressman back in the 30s and 40s in Catlow Valley. So there's been a lot of work on these, but it's interesting when I see OPB talk about ancient Ice Age man. They don't show him using an atlatl. They show him running up to a mammoth and spearing him. I'm going, that's crazy. He can turn around and squash you. But if you could throw from 30 yards away accurately, or 50 yards accurately, and penetrate that thick skin, which you guys will find out you could have done if you had an atlatl, you could take down these Ice Age animals. And that's what, I don't know if these people date from that far back, but we're only talking about 3,000 years ago, 4,000, okay? Not millions. Well, do you have any questions about this?
What is this called so we can find a picture online?
I don't know that it is online, and here's why. The National Wildlife doesn't want people to necessarily know about it, because there's not only people that do graffiti or destroy, there's people that actually steal these. This is a little big, but I know where I go, there's 2 miles of these down by Hart Mountain, and sections of them are missing now because people go in and take them and sell them on the black market. It's totally illegal, but
So this is the diamond, part of the Diamond Craters area on our left here. And this had pushed up through those flood basalts. And what we're looking at is a post-flood volcanics. In fact, most of the Bend area is post-flood volcanics. There was a lot of areas in the world where volcanism continued for hundreds of years after the flood, which put the aerosols and fine dust particles up into the stratosphere, which caused the Ice Age. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But parts of this diamond crater area is just erupted hundreds of years ago. And there's places we can drive through where it looks like there's no erosion, or it just looks like it happened yesterday, So there's a lot of different volcanic features here. There's tubes that were running underneath some of this basalt. Then it was, as it ran underneath, it pushed it up. And what do they call those, Marianne? Tumuli. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look at this one.
Yeah. See how it would push it up and it would crack? The flowing river of lava that was underneath the crust would push it up and crack it open. Yep. And it just expanded it and kept flowing underneath that crust and kept pushing it up.
We've got a tremendous preserved archaeological relic here. Pete French built this. He came to this valley in 1872. Can you kind of picture that in your mind, that date? Okay, after the Civil War, he went in partnership with a gentleman, Mr. Glenn, who was very wealthy and lived in California. So Pete French got some vaqueros. You know what a vaquero is? Mexican cowboy. So what did we get from vaquero? Buckaroo. Buckaroo. So he came north with a herd of cattle and some vaqueros, and they came into this valley, the valley we've been driving through, and basically said, "This is it. This is where I want to have my cattle, raise my cattle." And he developed a round barn here and another one somewhere else. And then where we were at the refuge headquarters, there was a bunch of buildings there that Pete French built. That was his northern headquarters. The P Ranch down by French Glen is where we were going to go today. We cut that a little short. We'll go past it tomorrow. That was the headquarters that he stayed at the most, was the P Ranch. The P Ranch doesn't stand for Pete. It stands for the gentleman that he bought the ranch from, who sold him the brand. And I don't remember his last name, but anyway, so that's an interesting little factoid. So he built this sometime after 1872. Did you have something to add? Oh, wildlife always takes precedent. There they are. I think it's a couple of great horned. This is great. Yeah, biology always trumps everything else, so no problem. Can you guys see it?
Where do they nest?
So that's their nest. This might be a pair. Males and females are different sizes, and the female is the larger. I'm guessing that might be a female on the right and a male on the left. So maybe they've got an active nest here. The other thing that's neat is their eyes are so huge, but they can't move their eyes, so they move their head. Yeah. So they
can turn their heads, almost 300 degrees? It's crazy.
They're just really. And when the people at the High Desert Museum have them out, they have a heavy gauntlet on their arm to show them, because they really they've got a good squeeze.
That's their hunting tool.
Yeah, that's their hunting tools. Right. So, who could tell me what you think they might eat if they're night flyers? Mice. Bats. Yeah, they occasionally can catch a bat. Occasionally, but typically bats can try and catch a bat. I had one in my house the other night. The only reason I caught him is I had a butterfly net that big. But there's a species out here called kangaroo rat. They would get that. The neotoma, the bushy-tailed wood rat, they would prey on those. But mostly they're voles. They're a meadow mouse that's a very large meadow mouse with a short tail, small ears, small eyes. Microtus, yes. Right, so they're the farmer's friend. Yes. Well, while we're looking there, that big pole in the middle of this whole thing, that's a juniper. And it's a nice straight one, and some of the logs that made this were hauled miles and miles away from up higher where the timbers came from. And the rock was hauled in some cases from quite a distance. Ranchers joke that a juniper fence post will wear out 3 fence post holes. So that's a joke. I don't know. Do you trust those guys? Yeah. But this is quite something to build. You think about coming here and there's nothing, and you have this thing in your mind, I'm going to make this. That took some, not just ingenuity, but a dedicated hard workforce.
Are you guys ready for hot weather today? Are you ready for cold weather today? Yeah, well, we're going to have a little of both, I think. So, well, Steve, you were talking a little bit about the flood. Yeah, I didn't believe that there was a worldwide mountain covering year-long catastrophic flood until way after college. Yeah, because all my friends in high school and college, they say, that's crazy story. You don't really believe that, do you? But today, we are going to see some evidence that there really was a worldwide mountain covering, year-long catastrophic flood. Yes. So if there really was a flood that way, we should first of all see evidence. Then it implies a few things, like that there really was an ark. So we have this story in the Bible about the because of why did there have to be an ark? Why did there have to be a flood? What does the Bible say the reason is? Any ideas? Yeah, there was a lot of evil. There was a lot of sin on the earth. The consequences of sin is just horrible. But there was a way to escape that. And that's what the ark was all about. How many doors were on the ark? Just one door, right. And in John 10, Jesus was talking to the disciples. He says, I am the door. I am the way. And so in a sense, we have the ark as a picture for us of the cross. And the cross of Christ. He is our deliverer. He's the door of deliverance. He's the only way we can escape death, is through Jesus Christ and what He's done for us. So that's why we get excited about looking at what we're seeing through biblical eyes. Because it really makes sense, and it gives us hope for the future and hope for eternal life.
I'm going to talk about the Ice Age and about Ice Age man, but I want to just give you, some of you seen this, a brief explanation of the connection between this flood. By the way, sorry, I'm a teacher. What are the words that describe the flood? Worldwide, mountain covering, year-long, catastrophic. Okay? That flood gave us the conditions to make an ice age. Okay? That would include warm ocean water. What would have made the ocean water warm? Guys, you in the front row, what do you see? Volcanoes. Volcanic activity. Crystal hot springs. Yeah. Just picture millions and millions and millions and millions of these around the world. We have underwater volcanoes all over under the ocean. Some of them are above the ocean, like Hawaii and some of the other places. But those active things would have been possibly part of the fountains of the great deep mentioned in Genesis, okay? They would have warmed the oceans. That heat in the ocean is key to the Ice Age. What? Yeah, because you got to have a lot of water evaporating, and then you got to have a way to make it cool, especially over the continents. How do you do that? All these volcanoes would have been putting aerosols, and that's a fancy name for volcanic ash, up in the stratosphere. You with me here? Okay, that would have caused insolation, at INSOL, insolation, energy coming from the sun. The light energy would have bounced off of that and would have created a winter atmosphere, especially over the continents. And the ice would begin building up on the continents. We have the only model that explains what really happened. 60, 70 models that have been put forward by secular scientists do not tell us what causes an ice age. This does. We're going to talk about ice age here. There were lakes all over this area, and in your book there's a picture of ice age lakes in this area, and then the remnants of those lakes like Malheur, Harney Lake, you know, there's Summer Lake, Lake Abert, and all those. Those are just little remnants of formerly huge lakes. Well, those lakes, we're going to be going through a place called Catlow Valley, and that valley illustrates terraces that are cut by Ice Age lakes. What's a terrace? Well, when the water was in the lake at the Ice Age, the wind drives it against the shoreline, and it eats away and makes a flat area. Got that? And as the water drops, sometimes it dropped rather rapidly for whatever reason, it would cut another terrace. So sometimes we'll see 2 or 3 terraces. And these terraces are not evident everywhere because other forces tear them down. But there are places where they show up really, really well. So we want to show you that. And this morning, because we're reversing the way we're going to do our trip, we're going to give you a chance to use that atlatl, which Ice Age man was using in the Catlow Valley. How do I know that? I have photographs and pictures of atlatls that were found where we're going to go this morning, in some caves along there. So we know they were using them. What were they using them for? To hunt what? Big things. Megafauna. Big mammals. Giant ground sloths. Giant mammoths. Mastodons. Giant buffalo. Bison. And camel. They ate camels. It looks like they were eating horses too. We had horses here, okay? There were some other creatures in other areas. I don't know that they were everywhere, but there were some strange, big creatures here, okay? And that's what they were hunting. So we're going to give you a chance to use that atlatl this morning while it's cooler down here rather than wait till it gets hot up there. Okay, so then this mountain we're going to be on today was split open, ripped open by faulting, okay, raised up, and then it was raised at an angle like this. So we're going to drive up on that angle and then see the drop off where that fault occurred. 1 mile. That's pretty dramatic. You probably wouldn't have wanted been standing there.
That's a big earthquake.
That's the aspen, okay? So you're in a grove of these beautiful trees. And this is a glacial cirque area where a glacier headed out in this region right here and moved down the valley from here. Tremuloides. So it trembles. Why does it tremble? Well, most leaves have a round stem. This leaf is flattened this way. So the leaf hangs here, the stem is flattened this way, and so it has a tendency to flop one way or the other. So that's why it trembles in the wind. And also, in forestry at Oregon State, I learned this is the one tree that's in every state, including Florida, and it's the #1 browse species in Wyoming. You know, as far as trees go. Cattle eat it, deer eat it, elk eat it, buffalo eat it. It's a very important source of nutrition for them.
Beaver.
Beaver eat it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so did you guys all see the erratics, the great big rocks beside the road? Those were moved by glaciers. And then as the glacier melted, left them laying there. Pretty cool. And then John was pointing out where the glacier scoured and actually planed off rocks in that one little valley. You guys saw that? Yeah. So there was a lot of ice in this area. We're going to see just how much more our next stop. So, and to get there and have enough time to see it, we need to load up. Okay? This is the classic glacial valley. It's a Kyger Gorge is probably one of the most classic I know of. I mean, you can go up into Malheur National Park and it won't be any more spectacular. But where it's what's called the head wall, and I believe it's about 2 miles across and about a mile deep. We both have a theory that as this was rising at the end of the flood waters were running off and they created channels that got the ice started. Now that may be true in the Tetons as well.
You know what, the Columbia Gorge basalt, the Columbia River basalt, and that is supposed to be correlated to this. It was poured out at the same time. So, yeah, all the layers, just like you see when you're driving down the Columbia Gorge. You know, it was poured out at the same time. And just like the Columbia Gorge, there are fossiliferous layers underneath this basalt, and there were also more layers above it. And yesterday, and part of the day, we were driving through the layers that used to be above this. And as these were pushed up, does anybody know a psalm or a scripture that talks about the end of the flood? Psalm 104 says, "The mountains pushed up and the valleys sank down, including ocean basins, and at thy command the waters fled off of the earth with the sound of thunder." So that took 5 or 6 months of the mountains pushing up and the waters flowing off. And a lot of geology happened during that time. A lot of canyons, all the major river canyons were carved. But there's a sequence of events that at the beginning of the flood, these huge areas were inundated, and animals and plants were killed. We're going to see some of those fossil layers underneath this tomorrow. And in the gorge, it's called Eagle Creek.
Eagle Creek Formation. In the gorge.
Right. And then there were flat layers of basalt laid upon that, and then more flat layers on top of that. Everything was flat on flat on flat, like a stack of pancakes. But at the very end of the flood, how did the water go away? It tells us the mountains rose up, the valleys sank down. Yeah. So this, initially, there was probably a flood-carved canyon here. And the ice built up here, and it was just a perfect place for it to continue building up and making it U-shaped instead of V-shaped. Right.
Yep.
Now, if you go up the edges of the canyon, some of them seem smoother, and then all of a sudden it gets rougher. The rocks get rougher, and they say that's about where about the level of the top of the ice was. So if this canyon's a mile deep,
it was
maybe 2/3 of a mile deep.
Maybe 2,500 feet deep, 3,000 feet deep. Do you remember seeing the snow? This is August and there's still snow hanging up here. So this is a drier year. My wife and I were here in August about 10 years ago, and there was a cornice of snow all over this edge. And my wife said, if you ever bring a group up here, don't you let them get close to that edge, because that breaks off. So I'll tell her we didn't have to worry. Yeah, you guys are all good and you're staying back. But there's some of us that have this crazy hunkering to want to get on a hang glider and run. Anybody else feel that way? Oh boy, wouldn't that be a thrill? Well, there's another viewpoint around the corner where these folks are coming from, and some signage if you'd like to look at it. I always like to read those signs and try to figure out what would I accept here and what would I not, what would I reject and why. And I try to take our high school seniors through that process. There's good information on these signs. There's also bad information. What would we accept? What would we, let's read it and figure it out, sort it, and use what's good. This is the Alvord Desert. We're on the Steens Mountain fault. For a change, it's not my fault. It's Steens' fault, and it's massive. It's a 30-mile rip in the Earth's crust. But you're looking at what was formerly a massive Ice Age lake. Lake Alvord. Because the water is collecting and it doesn't go anywhere, it collects salts and particularly your alkaline earth metals. Anybody know some alkaline earth metals? Come on, science guys. Calcium. Borates. Lithium, beryllium, boron. Those sound familiar? Magnesium. Okay, those are all your alkaline earth metals, and that's what's collected in the basin after evaporating for approximately, 3,000 years or so. There was a plant, I know that this is kind of anticlimactic, but there's a plant when we were walking up here that kind of looks like little red bags. That's loco weed. It's in the pea family, and you don't want to eat it. You go loco, yeah. I think particularly animals that eat it would. But I wanted to ask a question. Here's the design. Why would God create a plant that has a pod that's full of air? No, well, it's not underwater up here. How long's the growing season up here, do you think, at nearly 10,000 feet? Short. So what's happening is the seeds are developing in a microclimate inside of an airbag.
Wow.
Little, yeah, that's a good way to put it, a little greenhouse.
In there?
I don't think they germinate, but they mature. Yeah, here. Yeah, and some of them have already matured and opened up, released their seeds, but they're pretty common right here, and I was first introduced to it by a YCC director back in 1975, I think, up here. Yeah, pretty. So there's a lot of very interesting things if you have eyes to see. And now let's head on down to the Alvord Desert and have a little fun. Hasn't this been a great adventure? We saw God's marvelous designs in the local animals. We could imagine how resilient and resourceful the native people of this region were going back to the Ice Age. We saw how different the Ice Age climate was with lots more water. We drove up on the fault block mountain of the Steens and saw evidence for the catastrophic upheaval by the biblical flood. The Bible gives us a foundation for understanding the past, a basis for our scientific research. It's accurate, reliable, and truthful. We hope you encountered your Creator on this creation encounter.
The DSA and Creation Encounter did a great job. I would like anybody to go. It's fantastic. Just do it. A lot of times, men, dads, grandpas think, oh, it's not for me, it's for children. Go out, it's for everybody. Get out there with your children, your wife, your grandchildren. Go do it.
Coming down the Steens Mountains, we saw about 4 different herds, if you call them herds, that it was like 60 or 70 wild horses, and it was just so beautiful watching them out there.
Before we left, our pastor talked about creation from Psalm 19, and so I actually told him, like, hey, you're talking about this, I'm going to go see creation.
This was just one thing that I enjoyed was coming up behind the cowboys. In the cars the one day, you know, we were just driving along, and there was a huge herd of beef cows and four cowboys, you know, just I feel like they were kind of showing off a little bit.
Yeah. It's really cool to have a guide because you're able to just like really notice things that you wouldn't really notice if you were just driving down the street. But
I was impacted by just how much evidence for God there is just all around. You can see the evidence of God and who He is and His greatness.
Yeah.